Welcome to the Selectmen's meeting Tuesday, January 10th. It's good to be home, and it's good to be back to a regular schedule, dealing with the things that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Tonight at 7 o'clock, we'll start, as always, with citizens' input, followed at 7:10 by the town manager and the finance director reviewing an overview of the fiscal year 2013 budget. Kevin, I'm sure you'll also review the revenue projections or the latest numbers. At 7:55, I put on the agenda a National Grid update. I know that citizens are still concerned about what's going to happen if we have the next storm. Kevin's been working hard at that along with National Grid, so we want to give the public an update on that. At 8:15, the town manager will discuss the town council recruitment process and where that stands and how we want to proceed from there. At 8:35, Board of Selectmen, two items. One at the request of some board members regarding Board of Selectmen town manager communications. And then, as Kevin and I have been putting together the agendas, we wanted to make sure, since Kevin had a hard drive failure, where we had pending items, if there's anything that you have that you want on the agenda over the next couple of weeks, we want to make sure we have it all. We've tried to recover all the items that were in the pending file, but just in case we've missed anything. And then at 9:15, we have an executive session for negotiations, non-union personnel, and in between that, we'll find time to do action items. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance and ask Mark to lead us in that, please.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, citizens' input. Anybody for citizens' input? Yeah, go ahead.
Dick Heidecker, Grove Street. I sent you all emails on two basic issues I feel are very important, as most of them came up on the December 6th meeting, and you were quite busy in the interim, obviously. Plus the holidays, which I hope all of you had a chance to enjoy. I know you were busy. I know we were busy, but I just wanted to get back on a couple of items. The minutes on the 6th meeting is what's bothering me at this point. I asked 7 questions. 3 of those questions allegedly were answered. The first one is probably the most problematic. When you, Mr. Chairman, asked Kevin if he had copied that set of minutes, he said yes, we did. And these can be in quotes, because I have them in quotes that I gave you in the email from the tape I have at the house. The second part of it, did you give it to him? Yes. It never happened. It never happened. We need those minutes corrected. We need it pointed out in these minutes that it never happened, and there's a record of this somewhere in relation to Kevin Pecos. We can get into 2 of the other changes that took place, or answers, where Randy appropriately indicated that it's been done this way for 8 years and so on. I understand it. You understand it. This is the snow account. The advisory did have a June vote on snow as a transfer. It was a little bit less than $450,000. It was $8,900. That's a little less than the $450,000 we were all told they voted on in June accordingly. They did vote, as Randy indicated, on a snow and ice item, but not the $450,000. I have inspected the advisory minutes. There's nothing in there on the $450,000. In the meeting in July, I asked the collected members of advisory in open session, did they vote a $450,000? The answer was no. I gave you the statute, which Kevin referred me to, which states very clearly that a transfer may be made with the approval of the town manager and the advisory committee. Now, if what Randy has indicated is true, happened for 8 years, we have been in violation of the statute at least one of those 8 years, if not all 8. My question was, how do we transfer $450,000 without the AdCom vote? That was the question, and it was never answered. The third issue on negotiations we can get into, but the reference on the statute, Kevin can give it to you better than I can, but I handed out, as the handout on the 6th, a copy of that statute for your reference. I haven't heard a thing about it. I haven't heard a thing on the other 5 questions. I'm not going to delay the issue tonight, but those 2 issues need to be corrected. Where is that directive on the 0 and 3? And where is the AdCom vote required by statute that Kevin referred me to? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dick.
Question, Larry?
Yes, sir.
If I could just ask Dick, what is the date of the minutes that Dick says he did not get? Because, you know what, rather than trouble whether you got them or you didn't, I'll go get them right now, and then we're done with that. What's
This
the date?
is part of the question. It was an executive committee session. No date was ever given. It's mentioned in your minutes 5 different times.
Yeah, that's
This
the
is not
problem.
new items over 10 months.
Right, that's the problem, Mr. Chairman. The minutes that Dick wants are executive session minutes that the board has not released. I can't give them out. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Chairman, please. You and the other board agreed that enough of that information had been disclosed back in February when we sat here discussing the police contract, that all of the divulging of that information was done. All of your contracts on 0 and 3 are done. You're on the 1 and 1 now.
No, they're not.
You had directed him,
Dick.
pointed to him twice to release them.
Dick, what I will commit to you is I will get together with the town manager. I will look at the minutes that he says that he can't release. I will look at them and see what's in there, and then I will take them back to this board at our next meeting, and potentially the board will redact the things that can't be issued, and if it's just the issue on the one contract that was resolved, maybe we can issue that with everything else redacted. So I'll talk to him about that. I'll look at those minutes. We'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Can we change the fact that he gave me the minutes, as he stated
And
at
I will
December
also-
6th?
I will also, we don't have the minutes in front of us, Dick. I'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Everybody can have a copy of those minutes so they know what was in there or not in there, because we don't have them in front of us. All right, so we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Pardon me, again, I hate to continue. It was not written in the minutes, but it was part of the discussion. If you look at the tape, you will hear it and see it.
Right, all right, but Dick, I don't have the
It was
tape.
an outright lie, that's what I'm talking
Dick,
about.
I understand that. I don't have the tape in front of me. I don't have the minutes in front of me. I don't think anyone else does on the board. And unless the board has a different suggestion, I'd like to ask that we take it offline and the town manager and I will look at it and report back.
Just one other point, Mr. Chairman, for the board, as Dick is aware. Dick has taken his complaint because I didn't give him those minutes, and he's filed a complaint with the Attorney General's Public Records Division, and we have responded to them with a letter with the town's position. They are investigating that, and I would suggest to the board and to Dick that you allow that Attorney General review to go forward. If the AG feels that there's something that we've not been responsive about and they want to order us to provide it, they will do so. And on the other hand, if they feel that the board's reasons for not releasing those minutes is on solid ground, then they will tell Dick that he can't have them. Rather than short-circuit that process, and since those minutes are the subject of that appeal that Dick has filed, my suggestion is, Dick, you filed the appeal, the AG has it, he's called, let it play out. Instead of coming here and trying to short-circuit it, let the process play out. That's why he filed the appeal, presumably.
Right, but I think you and I still have to look at the December 6 minutes and make sure the minutes are accurate, all right?
No, sure.
So we'll try to deal with that, and if we have to have Pauline look at the tape one more time, and we'll try to make sure the minutes are correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am, come up. State your name and address for the record, please.
Karen Kearse, Heritage Drive.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Karen Kearse, Heritage Drive. I just have a question. in regards to, I know you were on Fox 25 and you're in the local newspaper talking about our budget, and I know you mentioned that we were $100 million in debt, and then you went on to talk about the fiscal responsibilities of the federal government, trying to bring it down to a state level. So my mom called, and she told me that we're in so much debt that we need to get a casino. We have no choice. So I went and pulled a copy of the audited financial statements that are on the website. And the things that I read are things like the assets of this town exceed the liabilities at close to the fiscal year of $64.3 million.
Correct.
I flip through and I see again revenues at $4 million, total expenses at $2 million. I see wording like the town's debt burden is reasonable in relationship to the other communities of its size, outstanding long-term debt, etc. Sorry, I'm nervous, but it just seems to me that what you're saying out in the world about our town isn't really accurate when you read the financials.
Well, I would say to you that if you look at the page on the bonds and how many bonds we have outstanding.
Is that the excluded debt or the
Would you let me
unexcluded
just
debt?
finish for a minute?
I'm just asking for
Let me
to
just finish
clarify
my
answer.
statement, then you can ask a follow-up question. If you look at the bonds for the Ahern School, the high school, the public safety building, if you look at the bonds we're gonna have for the library process, if you look at the water and sewer,
I did look
and
at
if
the
you look at the unfunded liability we have for OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, which is the retiree health care, and the underfunded pension, they come to somewhere in that neighborhood. Those are liabilities.
Okay,
That's
is
debt
that
that
the
we owe.
excluded-
That's future payments that we have to
Is
make.
that excluded debt or unexcluded debt?
It could include both.
Well, I think if you're going to speak on Fox 25 and tell the world something about, you should be more accurate in what you're saying about Foxborough. I understand that you brought it down from a federal level, and that was really informative, but I feel like it's a little misleading because it makes it sound like we're impoverished here.
No, I
And
was just trying to state a fact.
Well, then if you were going to state a fact, I probably would have taken a moment just to try to break it down so that people have a better understanding of what you're trying to say, because people look to you for direction. They look to you because, you know, you're the chairman, and you're supposed to be able to portray information to us that's accurate, and that we can understand. And, you know, a lot of the library debt is excluded, and I started to learn what all that meant. And I'm not going to tell you I've finished reading this entire 61 pages. But what I will say to you, from what I've read so far, it doesn't seem like what you're projecting and putting out there in the world is really accurate as what's going on here.
Well, what's excluded or not excluded, we still have to pay the debt
But
over the next number of
I
years.
understand that,
And
but I
Fox
want-
gave us 4 minutes and 12 seconds or something, so.
I understand, which I
Thank
think
you.
it would be even more important to really drill down to the points that really are important. Because I don't walk around saying I'm $1 million in debt because I have a mortgage. Because, you know, obviously all of us have debt that we carry, whether it's a mortgage or whatever. And if we're making the payments on our mortgage or whatever the debt we carry, that doesn't mean we're walking around with $1 million in debt or 100, whatever the thing is. It means that we have a mortgage and we make a payment on it, and it's going to be for the next 30 years we're going to do that in some cases.
Right.
And all I'm saying is, if you're trying to get information out, I think it really would behoove you at this point to just be a little bit more accurate so that my mother's not calling me telling me we need a casino because we're in so much debt. Because from what I've read so far, it seems like we're doing pretty well, especially to towns of our size.
Larry, if I could. Karen,
Go ahead, sir.
the hardest part about talking to the media,
Mhm.
whether they're writing it with pen or they have you on film, they might interview you for 25 minutes and they only put on about 2 minutes.
Okay,
It
I
makes
understand
it
that.
makes it very difficult to
But it's very similar to
say.
what I read in the reporter.
No,
I
understand.
appreciate your advice, thank you very much.
I'd also, and I'm here because a lot of people have asked this question, and I feel like a lot of people are at home watching because we didn't want to flood the room here so that we could continue with the meeting.
Right.
But a lot of people want you to speak to the meeting in August. And just, if you could please give everybody here, plus people at home, maybe an overview as to, I was at the planning board meeting, you know, I was there when they were talking about sponsoring the changes, and they wanted the planning board, from what I understand, to sponsor the changes. And then nothing was ever said at the Board of Selectmen's meeting in September. It sounds like none of the other Board of Selectmen people knew, so I'm just wondering what
I was
that
not
story
at the
is.
planning board. If you were there, you know
I
that.
know that.
And the town manager wrote I think it was a 2-page letter before Labor Day that was submitted to everybody on the Board of Selectmen. It was submitted to all the department heads. It was submitted to the Foxborough Reporter. It was submitted to the Boston Globe. I think the Foxborough Reporter printed the letter in its entirety, and it walked through all the issues that Kevin and I thought were appropriate at the time that anybody would need in order to make a decision.
Right, and I
I'm
thought
sure you
it
can get
was
a copy of that letter as well.
It was a well-written letter, and it helped me to understand the process. But I guess the question is, why, I mean, I feel like this is such a big issue, and they talk about on the state level how important transparency is, and I don't understand why we don't have that same transparency here in our small town of Foxborough.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Charlie Chavitas, Chestnut Street.
Charlie what?
Chavitas. I'd like to say thank you to the board. It seems like it's a thankless job that you guys have with some of the issues that are going on in the town right now. With that being said, I wanted to bring some attention to the fact that it seems like the chairman and town manager have come on some scrutiny that I don't think is very fair with taking meetings that were put into the newspaper with the craft group in regards to the casino development. I think those type of informal meetings need to be had. They always don't need to be in the public view. Development and things like that, you know, whether it's Route 1 or whether it's the Big Y, plans that were in place aren't always going to be in the public, and you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that type of planning that doesn't necessarily happen in these type of forums. And you know, those plans get built and submitted and presented in a place like this, and I just felt that it was unfair that some of the issues, you know, people in the newspaper taking to a light, saying that it seemed like there was, you know, shady deals going on or backhanded things.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments from anybody? Seeing no other hands, I'll move on to the next item on the business. I'm sorry, there was one more.
My name is George Adler. I live on Granite Street. And I have a different perception than the gentleman who just spoke. And I want to share some of the perceptions of the people of the town of Foxborough with you. But before I do that, I want to thank you for your generosity and your courage and your willingness to be up here deciding very difficult issues for the town, whether it's to put a dog down or to risk the town's historic character with commercial developments or casinos. I'm very perplexed by the casino issue. I just want to raise one issue, though. I've traveled through the world, and I've lived in Foxborough for 40 years. And I and many of my neighbors do not think of the land across the street from Gillette Stadium and Patriot Place as being a destination resort location. There is no mountain for skiing, no beach for surfing, no large city or wilderness for exploring, and no golf course. There will only be there, as I read in the papers, a casino, a conference center, a hotel, some expensive shops and restaurants. And since there is no official proposal, we really don't know what will be in phase 1 or subsequent phases that may come after that. And Mr. Harrington, I was very troubled by those articles in the Reporter as well. I was troubled by reading that you met with the craft organization in August and didn't disclose it for 4 months to other members of the board. Other members of the board were quoted as being surprised at it. You work for Raytheon. It's a company with a very large image at the Gillette Stadium, at the Kraft Stadium in large letters. You've appeared on local TV, creating the image that we need revenue, as the woman just said, or that there are benefits from a casino. You have to realize that there's a perception of implied endorsement when the chairman of the Board of Selectmen says things like that about a proposal that's coming. Now, I seem to recall from the presentation of town council at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting that if the town is presented with a proposal from Kraft, the selectmen are tasked with trying to negotiate the best deal they can for the town. And if they can't reach a negotiated settlement, they can vote to reject the proposal. There are questions in many people's mind whether you can be an effective negotiator for the interests of the town, given your actions of the past few months. I don't know how you go from the perception of being a champion of a project to an adversary who has to engage in a very tense and high-risk negotiations. I voted for you in every election you ran for in Foxborough. and I suggest you give deep consideration to recuse yourself from any casino-related issue that has to come before the town. I'm not questioning your ethics. I'm merely stating what the perception of your actions are. It might be in the best interest of the town to allow us to reach a better conclusion on this issue.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for listening.
No problem. Okay, I'll take one more, and then we've got to go on, if that's all right with the board. Take one more and go on, or you want to keep? I don't see any other hands.
If there's any other hands.
There's one more hand up, so we'll take the
Make
two
sure
of them,
that we-
okay?
Hi, my name is Martha Slattery. As you probably realize, I sit on the school committee. I had the pleasure of sitting on the school committee with Larry Harrington. I don't think I've ever met a more honest, decent, kind person in my entire life. To even question his integrity, I'm shocked. You know, you talk about living here for 40 years. At the end of March, I'll be here 64 years. I absolutely love and adore this town. It isn't issues that tear towns apart, it's people. And when I hear people say they want to hear what the proposal is, but they don't dare say anything because they don't know if their friend or neighbor will agree with them or shut them out at this point, I find that incredible. This is not the town I grew up in. It's not the town I love. It's not the town I support. So for people to go after Larry and question his integrity, I'm appalled, Larry. When you sat on that committee, you brought us to a whole new level. You made us think outside the box. You understood the issues. You spent as much time as you humanly possible. I think I'm shocked if anybody thinks you should recuse yourself. Because if anybody can make an open and honest decision, I applaud you for that.
Thank you, Martha. Ma'am, if you want to come up.
Hello, thank you. Natalia Stasowitz, 15 Beach Street. I came here just in the hope that you may elaborate on August 8th meeting not being disclosed. I sent you a letter on Sunday. I know it was late and some of you may not have a chance to read that letter. So I just would like just to hear your opinion. What was only troubling to me is that we all talking about democratic process and transparency and how important the casino is to our town. So I was surprised that if someone thinks that the casino is important and sees that casino coming on the horizon, why wouldn't you share this information with all of us so we can ahead of time think about this and maybe build a better perception rather than in December all of us finding out the news that Win is coming and trying to maybe catch up for what we don't know for the past 4 months. And I understand that the town manager disclosed this meeting, and that's how the news actually found out about this. But how come chairman did not disclose this information to at least Board of Selectmen, to the fellows, so they can relay this information, think about this in a group, and relay this information to the voters. Second, another thing I want to mention, before I heard Chairman Larry Harrington talking about our finances publicly, and I was thinking it would be more appropriate first to talk about our finances in a group, organize a meeting, so we as a citizen have a better understanding what we're trying to tell on the news, because I agree with the previous speaker that the information could have been misleading, or maybe the information that is shown, presented, maybe there's a snapshot, of 25 minutes in 10 minutes, but it does give misleading or incorrect or incomplete information about our town. And if we really think about a transparency, democratic process, then I would say that it would be fair to this, to residents of this community to have this first discussed before you go outside of this town, because this is our issue and not global issue, not national issue. We're not gonna cure economy here, and our town is not doing that bad. And I also look at the finances, and we, of course, not rich, but if you look compared to some of the towns like Wellesley and Newton, we're not that bad for the prices of the houses that we're paying, for where we live, and the quality of life. It's not really that bad.
Okay, let me just correct one item that's a misperception. The Fox News thing that people are referring to was on January 2nd. It was 4 minutes and 12 seconds, and it was live. It wasn't a 25-minute, then they cut and edited. It was live right then and there, and we had 4 minutes, and that's it. And she had a series of questions that she wanted to ask. So I just wanted to make it that it wasn't, many times, as Mark indicated, when they do an interview, they show 20 seconds of a 5-minute. In the Fox item that was discussed earlier tonight, it was actually live in the studio, and it was 4 minutes and something seconds. So, okay, thank you.
Larry, may I?
Go ahead, sir.
It's nice to be back here, that's for sure. Instead at the high school, I can actually hear you all very clearly. It's really enjoyable being here. Everybody up here takes their hits, okay? Linda took the first hits a couple of weeks, a month ago, and it was my turn. Now it's Larry's turn, I guess. I just want to make it clear, I couldn't agree with Martha Slattery more than what she stated. This man wouldn't do anything to harm this town, in my eyes. I think he's a great chairman. I think he's a good leader, and I enjoy working with him, with the other board members. There is a clarification letter here I wondered if I should read into the record, Larry?
Ken, if we just got it. I haven't read it.
Mark, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
I'd suggest we don't do this for the reason that this is citizens' input. This is
Okay.
not on the agenda. And basically, it's a letter from the Crafts, basically talking about the proposal in the meeting and the application.
So could we at least,
I just don't think it's wise to do
That's
that.
fine.
so could we
I
at least
will.
ask the town to make copies, since some people have asked about it? If it's pertinent, can you just move it over, put it over there,
Okay.
Kevin, please?
So, all right, thank you, Jimmy.
I just think
You're
if we
accurate.
do that,
You are
it's going to open
accurate.
up
Yeah.
discussion, and a lot of people have
Yep,
stuff
you're
to say.
absolutely accurate.
So
Okay.
let's just make copies, leave it there.
So, I mean, we all take our hits up here. We're all volunteer board members, and as long, not just the only board members in town, but, you know, I just don't think there's a harmful bone in this man's body. And I believe that sincerely, just so you all understand where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Okay.
Larry,
Go ahead.
we have on the agenda this evening, Board of Selectmen, Town Manager Communications. Is that part of, like, the discussion because of all the things that are in the newspaper? If that is, I have a statement that I want to read during that. Otherwise,
I'd prefer
read
you
it
to
now.
wait till then, if you would.
Okay,
If that's
just
okay
wanted to
with you.
double check. Thank you.
Okay. So if those want to wait to hear Linda, they can wait. It's not going to be that far from now.
Okay.
All right, we have a finance director who's back, so welcome. He's got a new look.
Yeah, you
This
do.
is the new and improved look, I guess.
This is the movie star
It's
look.
just my Manuary. Be gone in February.
Okay. So this item on the agenda was meant to be an overview, both of where we are from a revenue standpoint as people recognize. The state numbers come in very late. They trickle in over time. We get new growth numbers, and so this is a long process, and Randy comes multiple times throughout the process to give us an update, because the numbers change so much. So that's going to be the first part of it, and then I've also asked Kevin to give us an overview of the town's budget. And he's not going to walk through every page. We all have a pretty thick book here, but I've asked him to walk through the executive summary so that those folks at home and those folks in the audience understand kind of what he and the department heads have put together for a proposed budget for next year. So, Randy, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last version of the numbers that we had were from early October, and back at that point in time, we ultimately presented them in November, but back at that point in time, we were estimating preliminarily $723,000 deficit for the FY13 budget. So then what transpired from that date back in October through late December is we actually received all of the budget requests from all of the departments, and they were summarily, the municipal department budgets were summarily reviewed by the town manager, and myself and the school administration reviewed their budgets, and then we've had some changes, positive changes on the revenue side and on the fixed costs estimated budgets. So the net change from back in October is $434,000 in a positive direction. So as we sit at this point in time, we're looking at a $288,000 deficit, and I was just going to speak briefly as to the major components that drove the $434,000 positive shift that pleased the board. On the revenue side, there are two pieces. One was just last month we had our fiscal 12, that's this year's new growth certified by the Department of Revenue, and that was a positive change. We had $123,000 in incremental new growth tax dollars certified, so that was additive to the FY13 budget, because once it's growth, it's there forever. And then the other positive change was in other available funds, two pieces. One was we increased the commitment from the ambulance receipts revolving account necessary to offset $24,000 in estimated increase in collection costs. As you recall, we have increased revenues flowing through the ambulance account, and we pay a third-party percentage to collect that, 3%. And so with the increased revenues, we need to pay some increased collection costs. That's $24,000, obviously funded by the increased revenue. In addition to that, there were $39,000 in increases to required EMS training and some supplies costs that were needed to run the ambulance operation. Also able to be permanently funded out of the ambulance receipts account without jeopardizing a policy goal that was stated, which was with the new fee structure in the ambulance revolving account to still be able to take all of the dollars that are required to support the capital costs of the fire department and still be able to fund them through the ambulance receipts account. So we're able to commit this incremental $63,000 in recurring ambulance receipts revenue to the operating budget, to these operating expenses, without jeopardizing that policy goal of having enough dollars within the ambulance account, not only to fund the annual commitment to the operating budget, but also the ambulance replacements and also the fire capital equipment. So $63,000 there, and then we also added $60,000 in funding from the overlay surplus account to fund 50% of the triennial property revaluation. As you know, every 3 years we have to go through a process to review all of the property in town on a more detailed level, $600,000 to $700,000 range, annually. So it remains to be seen what this number is.
We're in that ballpark.
Well, that's good news. Okay, that was the only question. Thank you.
It is good news for everybody. I think, though, there are still, and we've talked about this over the last few years, there are lots of senior citizens and there's lots of young families that are struggling with the taxes as they are. So even if you hold it even, in other words, I don't tax here, but then I bring the library cost in and that's out to where it is today, it's still difficult for people today. Some of which are not working full-time, some of which have taken pay cuts. And so, I think it's still important to recognize that, we have 11% of the children in Foxborough who are on reduced and free lunches because their family's of financial condition. So there are still some tough economic times here. And as you point out, it's one thing to not raise to the maximum, but then you got the library coming in because that's exempt. And so, like, if we looked at the tax increase for the last couple of years, people have complained it's way above 2.5. Well, it's way above 2.5 because of, like, the high school project, et cetera. And so when people decide to, as a community, vote for the high school and vote for the library, you have to understand that that's going to have a big impact on the taxes. We also we have to be talking over the next few weeks, and Kevin and I have talked about on the agenda, the town hall, because as we've talked about the condition of this building, Kevin has indicated that the heating system is in pretty poor shape, along with the roof and some other things. And whether not everybody in the audience will agree, and there's some people that have disagreements, but the point is, whether you build a new town hall or you repair the town hall, I don't think anybody disagreed that there's work that has to be done at a minimum. And so there's cost that has to get built in from a capital standpoint, operating standpoint, whatever it might be for that. Also, when we look at the tax rate, it's also important to look at the total cost of living in Foxborough, and we've seen our water rates going up at double-digit rates. And we also know that we're looking at studying a new water treatment facility. And Randy, the rough cost of one of those facilities is?
About $7.6 million is what we put forward, authorized for this project.
So $7.6 million, then that has to get funded through the water rate. So when you look at, we've raised fees dramatically, so, that you could look at that as a tax. We've had to raise taxes above inflation because of the capital projects people have approved. and we still have some other capital projects that we need as a community, and other things that we've put off for a long period of time that will come home to roost. A good example would be, we've talked about this for a year and a half, that when you don't put money away for roads, eventually roads wear out, and then, you know, they get pretty bad. And not only that, but then it impacts people's cars and things. So this board took the bold step after the meals tax failed twice to try a third time, and this time to earmark the funds both for the retirement benefits, which the board took, as you said, some strong action on, but also for road repair. The idea that if we could be proactive with our roads, that we could stretch the life of the roads and actually save the taxpayer some money. So that there's lots of moving pieces, and a number of these we'll have on the agenda over the next few meetings, so that we can all understand all of those from that standpoint. Okay? Any other questions? All right, I guess the next item is
Mr.
the
Chairman?
National Grid. Thank you.
Just one thing I wanted to share with the board. I spoke earlier about innovative ideas, and one just occurred this week. And I wanted to take the opportunity out of the budget discussion to share with you a couple of paragraph letter that I just sent out to an employee, and give you this copies for the board. It's a $33,000 savings that one of our employees realized for us, and I thought that was pretty good. And it's indicative of the kind of work. This is a letter to Sandra Herman, my administrative assistant. Dear Sandra, please accept this letter of commendation for your recent work in connection with this year's property casualty insurance policy renewal. As you are aware, that renewal occurs in July of each year. During this year's renewal, I was occupied with my vacation and other projects. Exercising great initiative, you ensured that we took advantage of early payment and other options, thus ensuring that the town maximized available renewal credits. Sandra did a lot of work looking at the policy limits, and frankly displayed a knowledge of insurance that I did not know she possessed, and that would be credible for a licensed broker to have. She had a really in-depth knowledge. Thanks to your good work, the town received $33,248.05 in credit that it might well have otherwise missed. Reason I wanted the board to be aware of this, obviously, is I'm incredibly proud of what Sandra did. And this is indicative. I'm not going to say this kind of work happens every day around here. I wish it did. But it does happen with a fair degree of frequency, and I don't get an opportunity very often to share that with the board, and far less frequently to share it with the public. And this sort of work happens. You got some awful, awful good employees working for this town, and I think I should brag on their behalf more often, frankly, than I do. And so thanks for giving me the chance to say that tonight, and right here in your own office, and we're pretty happy with that. Great piece of work. And she'll be embarrassed as heck at home watching this, and I love that.
National Grid update, Kevin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As the board recalls, you had a public hearing at the elementary school following the Halloween storm, and the board came on pretty strong with National Grid, as I think well you should. And one of the things you had asked about was the status of tree cutting following the storm, with particular emphasis on what we refer to as hangers. Now, these are branches that are up there in the trees that are stuck. They broke. They're up there, and they're waiting for a good windstorm to blow them down. And these hangers are very dangerous. They can fall on people. They can fall on vehicles. And, of course, they almost by definition are going to fall on the primaries, on the wires. In fact, about 4 weeks ago, I don't know if you heard, but about a quarter of town went down, no power for about 2 hours, including town hall. And that was directly due to a hanger that came down on a primary down on, I think, Walnut or South Street, and took out this whole end of town again for a couple of hours till we got it cleared. So during the conversations that you had that night, you asked the representatives, there were 5 or 6 from National Grid, if they would come forward and begin a better tree cutting program. They indicated that they would do that, and the board further pressed, why can't you do it real soon? And there was some resistance to that, but there was some follow-up phone calls. I took advantage of Marcy Reed, the president of National Grid, very graciously, giving me her personal cell phone number. Our new DPW director has had great experience over the years working with utilities. He started dialoguing with his counterparts, the middle management folks, and they ended up putting 2 4-man crews in here with large bucket trucks for what ended up being about 3 or 4 weeks, and they really cleaned up all the hangars in town. Now, I'm not going to tell you that that makes us insulated from power outages this winter, because we still have a lot of branches, a lot of trees and branches over the primaries that are connected to their trees but can break. But I am going to tell you that as far as we know, we've gotten the vast majority of those hangars taken care of. They are out of town and they are no longer a threat to the public. And I wanted to be sure the board was aware of that the public was aware of that. I wanted to say a particular thank you through the board to Marcy Reed, the president of National Grid. You know, we offered a lot of criticism, and it was due. And we ought not to fail to say thank you when it is also due. And she made that due personally, ensured that those crews came to town and we're in a lot better shape for it. And a thank you to Dave Lalibert, our tree foreman, and the DPW director, Roger Hill, because they all made this actually happen. So that's a little bit of good news with respect to power in town. We had a long ways to go, a lot of work to do, but this is at least a little bit of good news. The other points that National Grid made in the letter that they sent, addressing public communication and a whole host of additional issues, we've not heard a word. Not a word, no follow-up. The DPU has concluded its first hearings. They concluded the hearings on the hurricane. To the best of my knowledge, they haven't yet opened the hearings on the Halloween storm. And that's because they were so overwhelmed with public participation on the hurricane that they haven't even been able to get around to opening the hearings yet on the Halloween storm. The town submitted a very, very thorough, in-depth analysis as part of our submission to DPU. Jim, I believe, followed up.
Linda and I went
with
to the
Linda,
DPU.
and actually presented that at the hearing by way of emphasis. And I heard back from DPU that Foxborough presented probably the most detailed, in-depth testimony of any community in the state of Massachusetts. We should be very proud of that. We all worked very hard on it. In terms of what it will yield, I'm sorry, call me a pessimist. As I've said to the board, I've been through this so many times before, and I've never seen DPU do anything meaningful to force the utilities to do the right thing, so I'm not optimistic. But we will keep the pressure up as best we can. Our rep and senator doing a fine job, trying to put the heat on. But unfortunately, the way laws are written in this state, public utilities are given a franchise, a charter, and they're really very immune from very much public pressure. The one bright note that I hoped we might get some movement on was that legislation to allow municipal governments to form munis, and that is absolutely buried in committee right now. I'm working with the MMA, and in fact, just today, an email was sent out requesting that MMA put it on the agenda for the next meeting of the Local Government Advisory Committee with the governor. And if we're successful getting that on, perhaps some of us can go in and testify directly to the governor and try to get him to get that bill pulled out and get it passed and enlist the MMA and lobbying efforts. But again, I'm pretty pessimistic. The utilities are spending millions of dollars to oppose it. And hey, the cities and towns, we don't have professional lobbyists. We don't have money to spend on that stuff. So we've got to work through our reps and senators. A lot of people in the aftermath of the Halloween storm, we were getting emails, and I know they were calling, and I know they've probably forgotten and moved on to other concerns, and that lack of public pressure on the legislators, combined with the very significant dollars the utilities will spend, probably will mean we won't get the bill passed. That's tragic, but we'll keep trying.
Would like to suggest to the board we take the opportunity to invite Marcy here in the next month. Not sure whether she would come or not, but to review with her, since she did come to our first meeting where we did the first storm. She didn't come to the second one because she was obviously busy. But I think it would be helpful to invite her or a representative, because we have to keep the public pressure on them. They have a wholly inadequate tree trimming program, And I think we have to keep the pressure on them to make greater progress on that. And it's not something that, as Kevin said earlier with the town, well, it's gonna take a couple of years because it's been out of balance for a long time. The utility company has to make a much greater effort. It can't be, 3, 4 years down the road, we'll have the issue taken care of, and then go off and do something else and have it come back again. So if the board's okay with that, we'd like to invite Marcy to join us sometime in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. We'll work with her schedule and ours and allow the board to ask her questions, allow Kevin to have an opportunity to go back through the open items list, go back through the 2 reports that we filed, and see if we can't build some additional pressure on her to make sure that as they're putting their budgets together, they're putting greater funding. As you recall, we talked about the office that services Foxborough,
Right.
and how many crews are in that office and how many towns that takes care of.
Right.
When we compare that to Mansfield, it's a day and night difference. So they have to make substantial investments in that area. And I think that if we and others don't keep the pressure on them, they'll be focused on other things. So.
Well, I think that, I almost want to say what Rodney said in mistake, but, it does feel good to fire someone who isn't doing the services that they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
But unfortunately, we're stuck right now because
Right.
we don't have anything to replace it with. But replacing it with, kind of taking care of ourselves
Right.
as we're doing with, the 2 new tree trimmer folks, that should speak volumes to her.
It should.
And so I would like to have her sitting in the seat and the folks at home here and listening to the fact that, regardless that we're paying what we pay for services that we're not getting,
Yeah.
and we're gonna take care of ourselves again, like we did through both of the storms, through all the volunteerism that came out and got us through it.
Yeah.
That's what Fox was about.
Right.
So she needs to hear that as
Yeah.
well as the public.
So you'll extend the invitation to her.
In fairness, at the DPU hearing, she did testify, and then we testified afterwards, and then we had a little sidebar. I don't think she was too happy
No,
with
she
what
wasn't.
we were saying, but she did offer to come back.
Right.
She
Did,
put her
yeah.
hand out and said, "I'd like to come back and tell Foxborough what we're doing and how we're gonna
Yep.
change," so I
And
think she
her
would be here.
assistant that was with her, because he didn't appreciate my comments either, the day after he responded to my, my words to him.
Okay,
So,
all right.
they do respond.
So we'll add that to an agenda item coming up. We'll try to work it into her schedule.
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
good.
Any other questions for Kevin on National Grid? Anybody? Okay, next item is an update on the town council recruitment process.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the RFP is out, and it's been out for about a week now. We're getting a lot of interest. I don't think we have any proposals yet, but the deadline isn't for about another 3 weeks. I can't tell you whether we're going to get 2 or 3 proposals, or we're going to get 10 proposals. I can tell you that we've had an unusual level of interest, and that generally says good things. The more proposals you get, the more choice you have, and that's always a good thing. But at the end of the day, we've had this happen before. We've had lots of calls on an RFP or a bid, and then when they finally come in, we don't get as many as we thought. So it's hard to read. If you end up getting 3 or 4, I think you're in a range where you could interview all of the applicants, and you could do that probably in one special meeting. If you get 7, 8, 9, 10, then I think you're going to need some sort of a screening process. And whatever it is you want to do, I and the staff are here to help you. Just tell me what you'd like.
Maybe see how many come through the door, and then we'll figure it out. We don't have to figure that out tonight, right?
No. I think the thought Larry and I had was more just to let the board know that be prepared, think about if you don't get many, then it's going to be a no-brainer. You probably just want to interview all the applicants.
We'd
If you
schedule a
get
separate
lot,
night
what do you
to do
think
that.
you
Right.
want to do? Just be prepared for that possibility. But the deadline isn't until, I think it's the last week of January, and so we're a couple weeks away from that.
Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, the next item was put here, Linda had asked for a discussion around the Board of Selectmen Town Manager Communications, and you said you had a statement you wanted to read.
I do have a statement, yeah.
Please, go ahead.
First, I'd like to say that it is really good to be home at this table in my seat, so thanks for that. I'd like to thank the chair for adding this discussion to this evening's agenda. I received many emails and calls from residents, non-residents, and the media about the so-called secret meeting. First, I'd like to address my fellow board members. I'd like to remind you that we as a board, along with the Water and Sewer Commissioners, asked Larry and Kevin to continue discussions with the Kraft Group in reference to the water treatment facility. This is part of the Patriots Place agreement. I believe that that meeting was just that, to discuss further the Kraft Group's position. I can understand how this meeting could have developed into other conversations with different ideas coming to the table. Folks need to understand that the Kraft Group is our largest taxpayer in town, and that keeping open communications with the group is imperative to enable us to continue to build on the working relationship that boards before us have built over the years. As a direct result of that meeting, Kevin presented us with a memo informing us about the possible need for gaming zoning bylaw changes if we would be interested in entertaining a casino proposal, thus informing us all that there has been interest from outside sources to bring a casino into town. As for the meeting where the Kraft Wind Groups invited selected individuals from town to attend discussion meetings, again, I don't have a problem with that. We raised the red flag of the possibility of what could be construed as a serial meeting by the AG's office. It was determined by the Kraft Group that only the chair of the board should attend and report back to us. I also want to note that that it was not Larry's responsibility to report to us who was in attendance. Larry gave us an overview of the group's discussion, and then a vote was taken whether to entertain a proposal for all the public to view. I have to mention also that I'm very wary of all this playing out through the media. Folks end up forming their own opinion of what they read, and reading between the lines is not necessarily good for the reader or the subject. We cannot stop the press from doing their job, but I believe we as a group can and should begin the healing process and move on with our duties and responsibilities to the town. That can start by each member resolving to remember our resolve a couple years back to bring any and all questions to the table, and not by finger pointing or making accusations about other board members' actions to the media, other boards, and or special interest groups. A couple things we need to keep in check here. No member should be reading about board business for the first time in a newspaper. For example, maybe other board members had a chance to see the final letter to Win before it was sent out, but I received my first glance by reading the newspaper. It wasn't until I picked up my information package on Saturday that I received a copy of it. I also believe that board members are going to the press about many things. If we're going to gain back the public's trust, we need to bring all questions to this table and be as transparent as we can. If we can't trust one another, how the heck is the public supposed to trust us? Again, I urge each of us to put our personal feelings about the casino and the attacks we've received behind us and move on with the business at hand. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Other questions or comments from anybody?
I do, Larry.
All right, Mark.
You guys all set?
I prefer to hear to understand what this topic is about.
Well, basically, I think it's very important that if you have something to say about another entity in town or business, I think we should try and be a little critical about the vocabulary we use in the future. Anybody. As we stated earlier, the press can misconstrue what you say. They'll only put on what they edit on the news camera, so your full message that you think you're trying to get across never gets through. So if you use one word out of content that you didn't mean to, even if you think, not even being at that time interviewed, they're going to use it, unless you say off the record. So I just want to be wary that we don't make comments about anybody or any group or other towns even, or anything, that can be misconstrued to, because basically what you say, reflects the whole board. It doesn't reflect individuals. And anything that the town manager would say reflects the board too. So we just need to be a little bit easier about what we say about people and try not to be caught out of content. That's about it.
Okay.
And Larry, I hadn't asked to put this on. I think it was Mark who
That was
asked.
me.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Larry.
It's okay.
Mark
Yep.
had asked, I'm sorry. Yep. All right, any other comments or questions? Town manager report then?
Sure. Actually, Larry, I just want to say that, I think that we all do have to focus on our professionalism. We have a job to do here. We have to work together. I think the concern, and it was mentioned earlier tonight a number of times, is, concern about really, I think, the integrity of this process is what has happened here. And I think we have to, step back, have good, thorough discussions. But, I think we need to talk about a little bit more our expectations for communication of these types of issues. Like, more specifically, I think, it is of the utmost importance that this, as an example, be discussed at this board before any assignment of work to the town manager happens. So, I think that, I agree, we need to get past all of these, the bad situation that this board is in right now. I agree, 100%. We have to get past that. We have to work together. But I just want to make sure that we don't find ourselves in this position again, because that, I think, is very important to us, being able to keep all these types of processes transparent so that, there is no question about the integrity of this board as a whole.
So just to react to a couple of things there. You mentioned assignment of work to the town manager. And so when Kevin and I were invited to meet with the Crafts, and they laid out a potential scenario that they had, Kevin and I think, both agreed that we had a responsibility to bring that back to the board. I didn't order Kevin to do anything, but Kevin and I jointly said, this is important enough that we need to bring it back to the board. And so when Kevin wrote his memo, you may recall at the time, I was on vacation, so we were dealing with the after effect of the hurricane, and I was on vacation.
Bless.
And in between all of that, Kevin wrote a fairly comprehensive memo. And when I saw the memo, I said to Kevin, I thought it covered absolutely everything that the board would need to know in order to have a dialogue, whether or not it talked about the interest, both the interest that Kevin was getting. It talked about Route 1. It laid out everything that he and I thought the board needed to do. So it wasn't that I assigned Kevin a task. It wasn't that I ordered Kevin to do something. We collectively felt it was our responsibility to bring that back to the board and have the board decide. There was a public discussion, there was public input, and the board took the vote at that time 5-0 not to go forward with the discussion. At the following meeting, I indicated, and the minutes also show that Linda indicated, that that we had received phone calls from taxpayers, from citizens, and we've gone through that. I don't want to rehash all that. And so I said that I thought, based on those calls, that I thought we had made a mistake, I had made a mistake, and that we ought to have a broader conversation around the community. The board didn't change the vote, and we kind of moved on. And then months later, we know that Mr. Wynn contacted the town and said, I'm real serious here about putting something together, and I would like to get some input from people. And the Patriots identified a couple of dozen people to go there in small groups and to talk about the pros and cons. What would Foxborough like about it? What Foxborough wouldn't like about it? And Mr. Wynn talk about what his thoughts were to decide whether or not he would go forward and spend whatever money it would take to put a formal proposal together. What bothered me, frankly, Lorraine, is the comments, and again, I'm not saying you made these to the newspaper, but the newspaper reported that you had raised the issue as to whether I had attempted to coerce Mark and Linda into changing their point of view, or whether the Crafts had called and tried to pressure us to change that view. Going back to what Linda said, I would rather if you asked that question at this table rather than through the newspaper. And I would have answered it for myself, and you could have asked Linda if anybody twisted her arm, or did she do what she wanted to do on her own, and did anybody twist Mark's arm? So I would agree with Linda that, you know, we have to have enough respect for each other to ask those questions here and not through the newspaper, because we do meet every 2 weeks and we can ask those questions. But getting back to the question that was asked earlier relative to the meeting, I still contend to this day that Kevin and I fulfilled our responsibility. I've been told in the past by prior selectmen that it's not unusual for the craft group to meet with the chairman of the board and the town manager on a host of issues. We were invited to the meeting, we went to the meeting, and as the craft group in that meeting indicated, for competitive reasons, they wanted us not to disclose every aspect of it, but I think Kevin did a skillful job in his memo of giving the public all the information about the fact that there were multiple developers that had an interest. It was specifically on Route 1. He talked about the kinds of facilities that people were talking about, including golf courses, et cetera, et cetera. And simply, he also went through clearly that the state legislation that was working its way through, which had taken years to get to that point, and who knew it was ever going to get through or not, but that it temporarily had some safeguards in there that would make sure that whatever the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board would do, that it would require the citizens of Foxborough, not a small board or small group. And he laid all that out for everybody, and he simply said in his memo, and I don't have it in front of me, but kind of, it might give us a competitive advantage in negotiations, since other communities are lining up for this. And so it was, what do you want to do? And the board had a dialogue in public. The audience was allowed to ask questions. We had some dozen people that made comments. One spoke in favor, the rest all spoke opposed. Tony LaChapelle, who 7-8 years ago was on a study committee, spoke about what they found years ago, and all of that was done appropriately. What I have said to the Foxborough Reporter is that I certainly understand that there are unintended consequences at times. And in the particular case of that meeting, the unintended consequence are the folks who have alleged that there was some kind of a secret deal that Kevin and I created. I go back to the record. Kevin put it in writing. He discussed it. He read it to the public. It was printed in the newspaper. The board discussed gaming in general, Route 1, with the whole, and made the vote not to do it. And so, in my view, it was transparent. However, I recognize that for some people that are always looking for the negative, that there's a concern there. And I also said to the newspaper that when Mr. Wynn invited 24 people from the community to attend an informational session where it was a two-way conversation where he could get information from them and they could get information from him, that again, an unintended consequence is that when I was asked, for instance, who are the 24 people, well, I don't know who the 24 people were. All I know is who was in my particular session. There were 4 other people. And what I said at the time to the newspaper and to the public was that I felt that the people that were in that meeting could disclose themselves that they were in that meeting, that it wasn't my responsibility to say this person sat there or that person sat there. But I did say to the news stations that afternoon, and I said to this board, that the people that were in my session talked about the impact of traffic, they talked about the impact of crime, they talked about the value, the impact it could have on houses. There was a whole range of conversation relative to the negative aspects that we've talked about now for a month and a half or 2. So I tried to make sure that when I came out of that session, I shared that both publicly and I shared it with here, and I tried to be transparent. But again, what I said to the newspaper is that unfortunately, and I take responsibility for it, but unfortunately some people were looking for things and as a result said, okay, that's not transparent and 1 + 1 = 19, and therefore this whole process is tainted. And for that, I said to the newspaper and put an article in for this week, I'm sorry that people feel that way. But those folks that know Kevin and know myself, I hope, recognize that we would never have done anything of personal gain. I can say that I have never asked the craft organization for anything. I've not asked for tickets to any events. I've not asked for access to tickets to any events. When my wife and I were involved in Faces, which we're no longer, I did not meet Robert. I had never met Robert Kraft till the night he came to our first gala and gave a $25,000 check. Neither my wife or I asked for that check, nor my wife and I had met him prior to that. He is not a friend in the sense that, like I think Linda might be, or Mark or Jim. I've never had dinner with him. I've never gone out socially with him. I've never had more conversations other than it from a business standpoint, or anyone else in his family. And so it pains me that people think that Kevin and I would have done anything that was inappropriate at all, because we tried to do everything in public. But I recognize that some people, for whatever reasons, want to look into something and see it differently. And, you know, Kevin and I accept that responsibility. We've been doing this for a long time. We accept that and move on. And I've sent a letter to the newspaper saying I accept the responsibility of some people feeling that the process was sacrificed because of these meetings. But in my view, the meetings were as transparent as we could be. We provided all of the information to the board and all the information to the public, and I think we did the very best that we could. And I'm proud of the way Kevin wrote the memo, and that we had the discussion, and the vote was the vote. And at the end of the day, the last vote was 3-2 to send a letter to the governor, the commissioner, the Crafts, and the Winds that the town was not interested. So ultimately, the town Board of Selectmen, with all the information that it had, made the decision that it made, and it was all those meetings were in public. We had 700 people, or some number close to that, in the two meetings at the high school auditorium, and we did our very best. And there's no hidden agendas, there's no backroom deals, there's nothing. Everything was discussed openly. You can go back and watch the minutes. You can read Kevin's memo. You can go back to the Foxborough Reporter.
A couple comments first, Kevin.
Go ahead, Jim.
I'm not the one to look for the negative or the conspiracy theories. I've enjoyed working with this board for the year that I've been here. And I've enjoyed working with you, Larry, and as Martha had said, you do have the best interest, and every step of the way has been in the right direction. As a board member, any issue that comes in front of me, I try to educate myself and have the information when I go into it. Not having the information that this proposal that was coming was discussed and on the table of the Patriots put me at a disadvantage. It put me at a disadvantage in September, and then for the 3 months following until the Patriots game.
But Jim, I guess
Hold on, let me just finish.
But we didn't get a proposal, just so you know. They talked in general terms about a potential development. We didn't have any details whatsoever to share with you, other than what Kevin shared in the memo. So if you thought there was more, there wasn't. But go ahead.
Okay, in August. When I go to the meetings, like, for instance, we've been dealing with the Neponset Reservoir issue. I go talk to the board, we talk to the owners and the policymakers, and we come back and report it. It gives the board an opportunity to understand what they're looking at the next step. When I looked at the special warrant article that introduced gaming or entertainment facilities, it would have been nice to know where this was coming from. I would have been able to put it in a better context. I would have been able to understand whose pen it was on the legislation that was going into the town to vote on. If it was the town doing it, if it was the Patriots doing it, or it was a combination of both. But what I was presented was something that, at that time, it was the town being proactive because the legislation was changing, and we need to get it in there quick because this thing was going to move so fast. And we were talking at that time, October, November, that we had to make a decision, December. So I'm at the disadvantage of sitting on the board not knowing the full story. I didn't have a problem with the letter going out to the governor after our 3-2 vote that went out to the gaming commission, the new gaming commissioner, that went out to Mr. Kraft and Mr. Wynn that said, and the letter didn't have any detail in it, it just said the board voted 3-2 not to be moved towards a host committee. It didn't talk about the pros, the cons. It didn't even say it was 3-2. I think it just said the board voted against it. If I had read that letter, I probably wouldn't have had any comments. We asked the manager at that vote to do it. He did it 2 days later. It went on. I didn't think it would be wise to wait another week or two to review it and then send it out, because I think time was of the essence. Talking about the media, you know, there was one issue that came up months and months ago when there was a 4-1 vote. One person went and did their own thing, and the board, I think, took a little offense that when there's a majority vote on the board, the people that weren't on the majority quiets down a little bit because the board's spoken. As members of the board, we don't win all the time, we don't lose all the time. Sometimes it's unanimous, sometimes it's a close vote. But when the chairman is going to the newspaper, to the cable, to the radio, and to the television with the minority presenting something that's good for the town, when the selectmen just said, we don't think it's good for the town, I'm not sure what the sense of voting on everything is from here on in, or do I have that opportunity to do that at the next vote? So I think that, you know, moving forward between now, if and when an application ever comes through, we either stop doing what we're doing, or it's a free-for-all and everybody does it, because there's no rhyme and reason when a board of selectmen says yes, and then someone on the board says no, and goes all that to the extreme of doing that.
So let me just respond, Jim, with a question. After you did your interview on Fox,
Yep.
which, you know, you didn't clear with the board, and I don't think you should have to. You did an interview on Fox, and Fox contacted me about doing an interview. And as you know, there's been lots of criticism. You've seen many of the emails. Many people copied everybody. And there were many accusations made that I thought were unfounded. And I thought it was important to do the behind the scenes so that people understood what my rationale was. Now, if this board wants to take a vote to say there are no media interviews, then I'm fine with that. But when one person does a media interview and then the media asks for the other person's point of view, I think it's only fair to do that. And I took a lot of criticism over the last month relative to the casino. For instance, you should be ashamed of yourself of reproducing. All right? I mean, the comments I heard from people in writing and on the phone were shocking. Shocking. And so I felt it was important when people attack you that personally. You know, it's okay if you don't agree with the issue. You think it's red, I think it's green, that's fine. But when people have to attack you personally, I felt obligated to have people recognize that I felt, for the reasons I felt, and I wanted people to know that. And it wasn't for the kinds of things that they said, all right? But if the board wants to have a policy that says the town manager can't do interviews, the board can't do interviews, then let's do that. And I'm fine to live by that. But, you know, the newspapers are gonna ask for interviews, the television stations, I don't know the last time Foxborough had an issue that radio stations from around the United States were interested in interviewing people, and newspapers from around the United States. And someone told me tonight, was it you that said you got a letter from Vermont or something?
Yeah.
A letter from Vermont. So all over the country, people were responding. We got a letter in our package here from a Christian organization or something. So I'm fine, Jim, if the board wants to do that, and I think we ought to decide if we want to do that, and then we'll all follow it, and then we all have the responsibility of meeting that commitment.
Right. Maybe you misunderstood what I was saying. It wasn't the personal part. When I was asked right after the meeting if I would speak to what the board just voted on, that's at the same time that you were talking to the cable doing the interview on the other side of the stage. The questions that I were asked was, what did the board vote? And I said, well, it was they voted against being the host community. Personally, I said there's people with money and jobs on one side, there's community on the other side, I'm somewhere in the middle. As we looked at it, we thought the community wasn't the right place. Nothing different from what the vote said. The community wasn't the right place. We sent a letter to the governor saying it's not the right place. I didn't get up there and talk about all the negatives. The difference is what I think you've been doing is talking about the tax breaks potential, the money that's coming in, all the positives associated with something that the board just said we weren't interested in. If you wanted to respond to some of the personal stuff, that's fine. I gotten a lot of personal comments to me as well. It's part of the job. But what I'm talking about is the vote of the selectmen. At some point, when the vote is taken, we move on for it. We'll wait for the application, but between now and if and when it comes in, we're going to have 1, 2, 3 months. You know, are we going to be looking at interviews on both sides of each selectman, making the best public pitch that we can for or against this project? That's where I'm not sure where this board's going. And it doesn't have to be a formal vote that we never talk to the press. I mean, I was asked about, you know, did I know about the meeting in August? I didn't say anything. I didn't call. There's certain things that I think is, when I'm asked if it's relevant that supports the board's decision, that's what I've been talking about.
And I think on the behind the scenes, I had the studies that talked about the traffic, that talked about the accidents, that talked about the impacts of addiction, the impact of embezzlement and divorce and other kinds of things. So I tried to, in that behind the scenes show, to share both sides of the issue and the concerns that people had in the community relative to traffic and crime and accidents and drinking, and the impact of English as a second language on the schools, et cetera. So I tried to provide balance so that anybody watching it would recognize that there are significant downsides as well that would have to be discussed in the mitigation. So anyway, enough on that.
Okay.
Anything else, Jim?
No. Thank you.
Mark? I'm sorry, Kevin had his hand up. You want to let him go?
After the board members.
I guess I won't do the Charlie Masterson show tomorrow. I was also asked to be on it. I don't know, has anybody else been asked to be on it?
Well, could you leave that door open, please? This is a public meeting, and it has to be left open. I'm sorry. Thank you.
You know, it's something that, you know, I guess you call it a gag order and all, but, you know, we all have our own views on certain things. And James is right. When it comes to a selectman's vote, and it's 3-2 or 4-1, you let it go. I never, ever, have ever gone to the press after a vote of the Board of Selectmen and complained about my other board members in my life. It's disrespectful. You should never do that. It's something, you know, if you didn't disagree, you just said, oh, you know what, the board voted. That's just the way it goes. It's something that's it's all a learning curve up here. Everybody's never been down this road. I was asked the other day by the Boston Globe, have you ever seen anything like this before in your life? No, not at all. And I just can't even fathom ever being elected to a Board of Selectmen and having to deal with this. And somehow I don't think there's going to be too many people trying to run this May because of this whole situation. But we just get, you know, what we're going to try and do is, you know, you had a hurricane, you had a snowstorm. We're all interviewed on that because we're working at shelters, we're working with public safety, we're holding community meetings every day. I mean, everybody that was in town was at those meetings twice a day for a week at a time. So it's kind of hard not to comment. It's I think the most important thing is out of respect for a board, and Bert Lane told me this back my first year on the board, Mark, when the board votes, that's it. You don't go out and make comments about, you know, I disagree with the board, blah, 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 or any other board in town. That's you know, their purview to vote that way. And I try and avoid the press as much as I can.
You?
Yeah.
Come on.
Like, you know, it's kind of a coming out meeting here. I appreciate all the dialogue. I think Jimmy as well, you spoke very well. I think Larry, everybody spoke very well. It's kind of a difficult position we're put in. Let's just try and keep our comments positive to the best interest of the Foxborough, and move on through this, because it's not over. The train hasn't even warmed up. That's the way I look at this, so, so I'll be respectful, and Kevin, this includes you. You have to, if the board votes, yea or nay, and you're not agreeing, I don't expect you or anybody, or the finance officer, or anybody else, or anybody that didn't get a raise in town, or anybody that got fired, going to and complaining to the press. It just doesn't seem fit to me that, like the last vote we had, me and Larry were totally against splitting the tax rate. We had huge dialogue. That was the end of it. We walked out of here. Jim, nice job. See you night, Linda. Blah, blah, blah. No big deal. That's the way it's going to be.
Well, that's how it has to be. And
That's what I think I'm
that's
trying,
what
that's
we're
my
discussing.
point
That's all I wanted to
across.
say
All
is,
right.
let's just try to get back to business. I don't want to bring up history, but, I did say at the beginning of this to be very careful that, there are times that it is a ploy to conquer, divide and conquer. And from what I've seen from this board in the last several weeks is it's getting divided. It's swaying this way, that way. But what it is we need to be able to work together. And, if we just say, all right, we're not going to even talk to the media, you can't really do that because it's part of our job. It's just be careful what you say and realize that, keep on the subject of whatever it is. Right now, this shouldn't be a subject of the casino because guess what? We sent the letter.
Right, that's correct.
I haven't been out there saying, I should have never sent that letter. I never said that. There's certain things that are coming into the newspaper that I haven't seen in my packet, and so I guess maybe I need to have a conversation with Kevin about, for example, the new town workers. I probably would have found it in here, but I didn't see it. I didn't look for it. I didn't know it was coming, but I got calls of, how can we hire 2 new town workers when we're in the situation that we're in? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, it's in the paper. And they send me the thing, and I'm like, okay, well, it must be in my packet. I must have missed something. I'm like, no, I didn't, so I got it today. But it was in the newspaper yesterday, so it's things like that. And it's like, I love the newspaper, Frank, I really do. It's just, I don't want to necessarily find my business of the day in the newspaper the day before I find it in my packet or things like that. That's all, Kevin. So the newspaper is huge tonight. We're really talking about the media, but I'm not a TV star and I don't like to play one at all. I like I said, I like being here at the table. I feel much more comfortable speaking, talking to, having our business in front of 700 people out in the audience yelling and screaming, and, they're all, hidden in the darkness because you can't see their faces, but they can all see ours. And, you walk into Stop and Shop now and Linda, and I'm like, who are these people that are coming? Like, hi, I don't know you, but they're going to tell me everything that they need to tell me, Again, it's part of our job, but we can make our job here a lot easier and a lot more civil if we just watch what we say, whether it's media, residents, on blogs, or anything. Just think about the other person that you're putting phone under a bus, let's just say, because it belongs here. Take a note and bring it here the following Tuesday.
And you're right, Lenny. Just one quick thing, too. We all get the emails, too. Don't get personal. Don't say things like you're a horrible father and stuff like that. Because you know what happens when I see those first words coming? I don't even know who it is. I just go delete. So you want to write something that's informative and a good opinion. If you're going to be insulting, or you're going to be say things like that, because I read them all. No matter who gets an email here, we all get them. So I've read everything you sent to Larry or Linda or Lorraine or me or whatever. If you get insulting, I just delete it. And then you'll never get any conversation from me, because then I put you on a little list that says, I'm not talking to you. All right, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Larry. While the occasion that prompted this discussion tonight may have been a difficult one, it's always good when the board has these kinds of discussions. I do not, as a matter of rule, comment on board members, your positions, the way you do your business. You are elected by the people, and you are policy officials. You deserve the respect that is due your office. And as I've said many, 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 many times, I will always, it is a demand that I make of myself and the department heads that we give you that. It is simply one of those inviolable rules. We can strenuously disagree, but we cannot disrespect the office of the board because you symbolize what the town government is all about. You sit at its head, and you are it. You symbolize it. I will, however, comment on my own actions and offer some explanations to you because I think I owe you and the public. The stories that broke this week contain a great deal of factual information, but two particular things that I found to be somewhat unfortunate. First was the characterization that the meetings were in some sense unsavory or secret or most importantly did not serve the public's interest. And then secondly, that I initiated the discussions about casinos. As an aside, I spoke to Dan Murphy, spokesman for the Patriots, relayed to him my concerns about the characterization that I had initiated discussions about casinos, and said to him that I thought perhaps he'd been misquoted or misunderstood, and that needed to get cleared up because that is, in point of fact, simply not what happened at that meeting that day. Mr. Murphy very graciously, and I am in his debt, wrote what I thought was a very thoroughgoing letter, and I know that many people have taken that letter tonight, and I do hope the press will hearken to his words in there that the proposal, the discussion about casinos that in fact was generated by Mr. Kraft, and that Larry and I were present at the meeting, had been indeed called to the meeting at their invitation to discuss that and other issues. We did not know that was an agenda item. We did not know that till we arrived there. We presumed that the ongoing discussion was about the issues we had been in discussion with for some months. The second issue I want to address is this notion that somehow it was a disservice for us to meet with them, or that somehow failure to disclose that we had that meeting was a disservice to the board or the public. I know the board knows this, but perhaps the public doesn't. Any town manager, be it me, Andy Gallo, my predecessor, any of the town managers in any of the communities around us, are called and asked to attend dozens of meetings a week, hundreds, if not thousands in a year. Very often those meetings are with government officials, sometimes with employees who have deeply personal issues that they wish to share, and very often they're with members of the business community. And in all of those situations, we are expected to comport ourselves with dignity and with respect when someone asks that that issue remain confidential. Consider for a moment how the town could possibly advance its economic development interests if a businessman asked me to attend a meeting, told me about a proposal that he or she wanted to pursue, and I said to him, I'm sorry, but everything you tell me I have to disclose publicly. There would be no economic development because no businessman would feel safe to have a confidential discussion about a business initiative which would be not subject to the prying eyes of his or her competitor. That's reality. When Mr. Kraft approached us with this idea, and at that point it was just an idea, it was not a specific proposal, as Mr. Murphy says right in his letter, they specifically requested that Larry and I maintain their confidentiality. The reason they made that request was because there is a great deal of competitiveness. It was characterized for me recently by other folks that it is a cutthroat business, the casino business, and that there are a great many interests who would have immediately endeavored to intervene in a negative way were it known that anyone was considering the placement of a casino anywhere, be it Foxborough, East Boston, or any place. And so we were specifically asked to maintain confidentiality. And Mr. Murphy was kind enough, because I can't say that, and I don't think Larry can say it on our own behalf and have credibility, because it appears defensive. Mr. Murphy said it, and I appreciate him saying it. When I came to the board with the idea just a few weeks later, I was doing, in my estimation, exactly what you pay me for, to bring you ideas, whether I generate those ideas, or other people suggest them, or staff employees suggest them, or I read about something. I'm supposed to bring you ideas. The situation we find ourselves in with respect to that budget that we discussed earlier tonight is nothing more than the culmination of lots of ideas. Now, every once in a while, I'm going to bring you a bad one. Now, that bad one or good one is in the mind of the beholder. I will tell you frankly, when I was told about this proposal, I will say to you in absolute honesty, it sounded exciting. It sounded interesting. Here I was being told by someone who is an inordinately successful businessman and understands it a lot better than I will ever, that here was an interesting proposal on a parcel of land which was unlikely to be developed as a technology park, because he had just been on fact-finding missions, as had been heavily publicized, and it was unlikely that anybody was coming forward in this economy to develop that. But here was an alternative proposal. And what was our interest? And I think, had I said at that moment, or had the chairman said at that moment, no, we're absolutely not interested, no, absolutely not, we will not even bring this to the people's attention, we would have been terrifically derelict in our responsibility. We would have been abjectly derelict. The idea, right, wrong, or indifferent, deserves to be brought forward. And so I did. And I wrote that memo to the board. I stand by writing that memo to the board. I think it was the correct decision. I think I did the right thing in bringing that to your attention. And ultimately, the community has to decide if this idea, like every other idea I bring you, is a good one or a poor one. As time has unfolded, it has become evident to me that this is not a good idea for Foxborough. And I have given you the benefit of that recommendation, and I stand by that recommendation, and that is what I believe, both in my professional judgment and in my heart as well. Board members disagree with that. You disagree with each other. 17,000 citizens of this community all have differing opinions on the subject, and God bless us, that's what makes democracy go round. That's how it works. It should not be the case, ever, that this difference about an important public policy issue is allowed to degrade into the kinds of personal attacks that are currently going on. I will tell you that on December 5th, when the board had a meeting and I gave you that statement that night, I predicted that this would be the outcome. And I predict that it will get worse, unfortunately. It shouldn't. But that is unfortunately the way we choose to do our business in America. And it's terribly unfortunate because, as I've said time and time again, I know you five ladies and gentlemen. You comport yourselves with dignity. You do the best job that you can do for the people of this community. And while I may not agree with you, and I know that you don't always agree with what I recommend to you, you're doing the best job you can do. It is really a shame that people decide to attack you publicly or privately and in the manner that it's been done. I make my living from this. I expect it. You don't get paid to do this, and it's unfortunate that people do that to you. I was a selectman for almost 8 years. I'm a recovering selectman now. But I sat in your seats many, many years ago and suffered some of the same sorts of indignities that are being hurled your way now, and I truly do feel it's unfortunate. How you do your business and what you do, I think is always subject to the people's judgment. You run for elective office, but people ought not to attack you personally. That's wrong. Shouldn't happen. I wish, I said this to the chairman, and I will close with this. I said this to the chairman just a couple days ago, and I'll say it again now. I wish this casino had never been proposed. I wish with all my heart it would just go away, because this sort of discussion tonight and the kinds of things that are happening in this community, if this casino proposal continues, are going to continue, and it's going to get worse, and very, very good people are going to get badly hurt by it, and that is most unfortunate. However you feel about the casino, good or bad, and I don't support it, the process is going to be truly unfortunate. And I believe that with my heart. That's why I told you that a few weeks ago. And we're seeing it unfold. And it's truly tragic that it's going to happen like this. I wish it would just be withdrawn. So, Mr. Chairman, I felt that I owed the board some explanations. I do apologize, Linda, that you saw that letter in the paper for the first time. There was some confusion in the office. My hard drive crashed. Tragically, my emails did not. They're all still there. But my hard drive crashed. Some files got lost. There was a disconnect. Somebody thought it was sent to you. I thought it was sent to you. By the time I realized it wasn't, when Larry told me it wasn't, I couldn't bring it up on my hard drive because I didn't have it. It was the New Year's weekend, and I couldn't do it till Tuesday morning, and we got it out as, and then I thought Tuesday you had it, and I learned you didn't have it till the end of the week, and then we got it. So my apologies. You should not read about things in the paper. I get that.
Yeah.
I do my best. It's not going to be perfect, but I think in fairness, it is rare that that happens. It did happen this time, and my apologies, but there were reasons for that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me speak. And I do hope that that folks in the audience and the press will take advantage of this letter that Mr. Murphy, again, very graciously wrote, because I think it clears up a lot of the misperceptions that were in the media this week. And I think this will advance communication and maybe help people to see there was nothing hurtful or unsavory or detrimental to this town's interest going on. There was not with that meeting.
Thank you. I'd like to try to get through the action items fairly quickly if we could.
Yeah,
and
let's
then go
start
to
the
executive
healing.
session. The first item of the minutes of December 27th.
I always look down to the ladies for these corrections because they find them pretty
Just
accurately.
on page 2, Pauline, the second paragraph, I made the motion, but I didn't look at the tape or whatever to see who seconded that, but for the change of name.
You didn't make any.
I made the motion, but I don't know who seconded it.
Didn't be made by you and seconded by you, Chris.
It was probably Lorraine.
Sorry about
It's the other Linda.
I have no idea.
It's probably
Anybody
Lorraine.
remember making
Where is
that?
it?
It was for, when we were changing
Change of manager for the
manager.
Renaissance.
Oh,
You
I
were
second.
sitting, yeah, you were sitting
Lorraine that
next to me, so I
seconded
would
I'm
assume.
sorry about that.
That's all right.
That's the only thing
It
I
was a
had.
busy night, Pauline.
It was. Any other corrections?
I have one on page 4, Pauline. First large paragraph right after item number 4. If you go down to the end of it and back up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, it says Lorraine Brew inquired whether the gaming laws require in any particular way. That sentence, do you see it? Can you amend that to Lorraine Brew inquired whether the gaming laws require any particular action? By the town if it does not want to, I can't read my own writing. If it does not want to enter into a host community agreement. And up towards the top of the page, recommendation, the Windcraft share the costs. I thought that was the Windcraft pay for the costs incurred by the town?
I think it was bear the cost.
Beer,
The
it
cost?
was beer, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else, Lorraine?
No, thank you.
Jim?
Yep, on page 2, from my notes, there was some people that spoke that were not listed on this. I know a Selectwoman, Nancy McKenzie of Walpole, spoke, and I think there may have been a couple more.
I don't think she was trying to list everybody, were you?
No,
There's-
because
there's
I
quite a
I
few that
couldn't
aren't
get all
on
the
here.
people's names. But you wanted to, did you want to have the...
Well, hold that thought for a second, because I want to come back to that, if you could, Pauline. On page 4, second paragraph up from the bottom, it's where it says contentious. I think that word should say courteous. It says, Jim DeVellis expressed frustration where the discussion was going. The follow-up meetings under the premise that the board is being contentious. I think we were being courteous to have these meetings to give them an answer. The entire discussion on the liquor, not having control over the liquor licenses has been omitted, and I think that's important.
Where do you want that?
Wherever it occurred, it was towards the end,
Wasn't it when Durensis was presenting?
after Durance
Yeah,
was
it
presented.
was
But
from
Jim
the-
DeVellis asked for confirmation from, I have this for you, Pauline, from town council that according to the Gaming Commission, the town of Foxborough does not issue or have any control or jurisdiction of any and all liquor license issued to the casino. And Attorney Durensis confirmed this. And what I was going to ask the board, this December 27th meeting minutes, having been through contentious projects in the private sector, this will be an exhibit. I guarantee you, this will be an exhibit in some type of follow-up litigation if this casino doesn't go through. I would like Attorney Durensis to look at these meeting minutes and go through them before we approve them, because this is something that is going to show up later on, and I'd rather have him look at this.
Okay.
Good
So
point.
you want to hold off approving them until he's looked at them?
That's a real good
Okay.
point.
Any other changes, corrections? All right, we'll send those to him after they've been corrected.
That would probably make us want to scrutinize him even more with James' comments to make sure what you said, is exactly what you said, because this could be actually part of something in the future.
Right.
All right.
The next item is an easement grant from National Grid, Kevin.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you've got that, the original one over there, that's a routine grant for underground utilities.
Asian Grid wants something from us?
For $1.
We gotta take advantage of that.
$1.
Yeah.
We have a motion?
I'm sure it's fine, but there's no plan or where this is other than it's off of, I think, Bird Street. But
Yeah.
this is drafted by,
Did you not get this plan?
This one here, Jim?
okay, it is on there, okay, I'm sorry.
There's a diagram.
That's all
Second
right.
page from the back.
I'm set then, thank you.
Okay. So is there a
So
motion?
is it, just,
For the library project?
Yeah.
yeah, just to approve the easement grant
Yeah.
for
Motion.
National Grid?
Motion by Linda,
Second.
by Mark. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries 5-0.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve
Roger Hill.
DPW Director to the Canoe River Aquifer Advisory Committee to complete Leo Potter's term.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Appointment of the following to fill 2 vacancies of the Disabled Citizens Committee to a term expiring May 1st, 2012. Maurice Tony Williams and Charles Hobbs.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mark, second by Linda. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. A motion to accept the resignation of Lee Estabrook from the ZBA
So moved.
with gratitude.
With gratitude, sorry. Thank you, Lee.
Second.
Second by Linda. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Appointment of Barnett Uvrut as a full ZBA member to a term expiring 5/1/12.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, second, discussion?
Just a comment that I'm thankful that Kevin Penders is staying on as an alternate member to the board.
Okay.
That's 5-2 right there, 5-2, Paul.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
I move that we appoint Kim Mellon as the associate member of the ZBA for the term expiring on May 1st, 2012.
There's a motion, there's a second. Kim is here. Does anybody have any questions for her? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Kim. Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept $3,333.33 grant from the Massachusetts Assisted Living Facilities Association to the Council on Aging?
So moved.
There's a motion by Linda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lorraine. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. There's a request for an acceptance of a $5,265 grant from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to the Fire Department to provide educational services to school children regarding fire safety. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Motion by Mark, second by Linda.
Yep.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There's a request for a one-day all-alcohol license for the Patriots playoff game on 1/14.
This is one that we do every, well,
I thought we already approved this.
yeah, but it's because of the
Playoff.
playoff game on the
I thought
14th.
we already approved it, though.
Not for goals, not for first
Oh,
and goal.
somebody else?
Yep.
Yeah,
All
This
right.
is for Fred Smirlis' group.
yeah.
So is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mark, is there a second?
Second.
By Linda. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Kevin, just a quick question for the public at home. The Patriots having a playoff game will generate approximately what revenue for the town in terms of tax?
Depends on the final gate, but it's always in excess of $100,000,
So, two playoff games produces a couple $100,000 plus the meals tax that goes
which
with it.
demonstrate the importance of the first seed, which is why we had to beat Buffalo.
Right, okay.
Right.
A request for one-day additional all-day, all-alcohol license for a possible
You
second
realize I
playoff
can
game.
never look at the game the same way again now. I have to think in terms of, we need to win for the Patriots, but we need the money, too.
That's right.
So-
That's
So
right.
Fred is optimistic that they're gonna have a second
the
playoff game,
22nd.
and he wants to have a
So
license
moved.
for that in the event.
Moved.
There's a motion,
Second.
and there's a second, subject to them actually playing that day.
Yeah, right. Well,
No jinxes, Larry.
Right. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. A request to accept a $120 donation from Vicky and David Lowe to Animal Control Gift Fund.
So moved with
Gratitude.
gratitude.
Motion
Got it.
by Mark, second by Linda. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And Kevin, you want to just update number 10 for the community?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a notice to the board that your reports, goes out to everybody, including the board, that your reports are due by Friday, February 10th, in order to get into the town report. And also a notice to the departments that warrant article deadline is Friday, February 17th, just because it's coming up sooner than some might expect.
I'm sure it'll only take you a couple hours. It took me about 5 days to write that.
It's not so easy. But we got a lot of material this year.
Larry,
More crap. Yeah,
just
sorry.
a quick mention, I'll be meeting with Dick this Friday to talk about the format of the town meeting report
Right.
that we had been discussing.
I heard you earlier today on that.
Motion to adjourn to go into executive session.
For the purpose and,
Strategy with respect to bargaining with non-union personnel and union personnel.
and the rest of the sentence is?
I'm sorry?
And the rest of the
To then
sentence?
to come back into a regular session to only solely to adjourn.
Correct.
Yay.
So there's a motion by Mark. Do I have a second? Second by Linda. I'll poll the board. Mark?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Lorraine?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. We'll take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll go into the...